thanks for joining us today, especially on a Saturday night. Okay, thank you for being here. So let's start with the topic. Today I'll be discussing about Async API in Anypoint Code Builder. And before that, we have a safe harbor statement where this meetup is conducted individual capacity, not promoting any companies here, and it is for meant for only like learning purposes, not for any promotional activities. So for housekeeping, this recording will be available in the page for 24 hours, and you can ask questions anytime. Like you can unmute yourself and ask questions, and also you can post your questions in the chat if it's fine for you. And we would love to know your feedback after the session. Coming to organizers, I'm one of the organizers. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Anusha Kandadai, and I'm working as a MuleSoft developer at Holiday and Club Vacations. I have total 4 years, 4+ years of experience in MuleSoft and 5 years in integration space. And I'm a certified platform architect and developer. So over to you, Karnik.
Hi team. So my name is Karnik Jain, and I'm currently working as a technical consultant at Salesforce. I have 4 years of experience in integration space. So that's it about myself.
Thank you, Karnik. So I'll be taking up the session, so I do not want to reintroduce myself. So coming to the topic, today we'll be talking about event-driven architecture first before getting into Async API, and then about Async API, the message brokers that is being supported by MuleSoft right now, and we'll see a use case. And also, I would like to talk about Anypoint Code Builder because we'll be doing this entire design, deployment, implementation part in Code Builder, and also the latest releases of Code Builder. That will be interesting for you. And finally, we have queries and references like for your help. Okay. Coming to event driven architecture, right? To keep it very simple, see, like we have synchronous patterns and also asynchronous patterns, we all know. So coming to asynchronous patterns, we have this event producer and consumer part of it. And synchronous patterns are nothing but RESTful APIs, which will help us connect with multiple systems and have this API-led architecture in place. But event-driven architecture is something where the system responds or reacts based on the events that is happening in real time. So it is real time, and also we can call it as near real time. And to work it like to work or like to use this event-driven architecture in API-led architecture, right? Event-driven architecture. I just took two scenarios just to explain a brief about it. So on the left side, you'll be able to see here. You can see that we have um, an API where we are using. The first scenario is that the subscription of this messages or like consumption is happening through the experience API. So we have the API specification that is included in the experience layer because, as we all know, I did like in an ideal scenario, we use experience APIs to talk to the external systems. Like that is what we prefer in an API-led architecture, so that we'll have a proper documentation and like references, so that once we consume from experience API, we can do a canonical model of transform of the messages that we receive and then move it to process layer. So that is an ideal structure. But then we have also another scenario where most of the projects I have seen is that they do not use experience layer, they directly use a process layer to consume the data. So here what happens is that if you apply an API specification, async API specification on process layer, you get to use that like the resource utilization will be very less. The number of vcos that you will be using and everything will be very less or very few. And then the one thing is that you get to you consume the data immediately, and also you go ahead and do the transformation, and also the retry part of it is involved in process API as well. So that it is suggested that the process API, which involves the subscription of messages directly, will have a retry error handling mechanism like circuit breaker or any other retry mechanism in place, so that it will be able to handle the information, that real time information. And also another thing that I have observed is that we can call one process API to another process API and then do the part of it. So that is also a possible thing. But then as we also dealing with loosely coupled systems, this particular architecture is really important, or like this particular scenario is important to keep in mind. So coming to async API, right? So this is a specification that is introduced by, or like it's already present, but it is introduced by MuleSoft in 2021 for us. So where you will be able to structure the data. Like for example, if there is a source that I have to provide my queue details, I'll go ahead and say that these are the details. This is the host. This is the URL or credentials that you have to use to call uh, the Anypoint MQ. Instead of doing that, instead of not having the, I mean, instead of not having this conflicts in the long run, I can go ahead and create a specification which will have all the details like servers, channels. I mean, like the Anypoint, all the URLs details, and also you'll be able to structure your with specific payload content. So as you do in RAML, you create type, right? You create a type in RAML saying that this the payload that I'm expecting is an object. The payload that I'm expecting is an array. So you will be able to validate it on a RAML level. So similarly, in Async API, you can add your payload and say that this type is object. I'm expecting a string here, so this is how it has to be. The payload that is coming in, this is how it has to be, and with a proper documentation. That is what it actually is, like the specification part of it. And this is mainly used in pub sub model, as we discussed. It's for event driven, so obviously it involves pub sub model. And coming to root elements, right? Async API has root elements like similar to RAML, where we mention the methods, resources, etc. We have root elements in Async API. This is hugely classified, and I have mentioned only few here. Like inside operations or components, there are many to for reusability. We have traits, etc. So there's many components involved. So I have provided the references. You can go ahead and check the entire documentation part. Right now, I'm covering only this. So info will have the description, the version, and also the contact, which is really interesting because you will be able to see the person who created the specification with an email. So that is actually an helpful information. And coming to servers, here what we do is like if I'm using Anypoint MQ, I'm going to say that the server URL is this, and also the protocol is this. So if I'm using Kafka, I'm going to provide the Kafka URL and the information that is required for that to call the endpoint. And coming to channels, here we add any point MQ, or like the details, the topic names, like a resource. For example, you get to add a post or get method in RAML and add your details, like if it is a response or payload or whatever, you kind of add there. Similarly, in channels, we get to add the queue details or topic details, and also the information that is going to consumed by that particular queue. Or the actual operation is like if it is a subscribe or if it's a publish, you can mention it in the channels. And coming to operations, mainly I have observed whatever I have worked on till now or like explored. It is used for traits, where you can create a trait and reuse it inside channels and components, or else you can merge the traits that are created by both these components. So that is it. And for components, it is like where you hold the actual payload, to where you create an actual example and refer it in the channels. So yeah, please let me know if I'm going too fast or something. And here is an example that I've created. It's a very straightforward, simple example, which talks about Anypoint MQ servers, channels, and components that I've had. As you can see here, so we have URL where you'll be adding your actual Anypoint MQ URL and the protocol. And channels will have user sign up. User sign up is nothing but the MQ name that I've created, and the subscribe is the operation that I'm creating for that particular API. So for a scenario, this is created for a scenario where it's just a account service, where it is taking the data, it is consuming the data from the source and then pushing it to the target. So that is it. In the components, as you can see, I have created a payload which has properties in the first name. Like as you can see, the type is object, so you get to define the types and etc. So, and also I've mentioned the same thing here, like what are we using and what are we placing it. um, as we do not have access to Anypoint MQ in trial version, it is only available for enterprise edition. So I have just taken a screenshot so that it will be helpful for you to get an understanding which URL should be pasted in channels or service. So you can see this, right? Like in destinations, you go and get your URL, which is like US East in Virginia here. So you just paste that URL here, And you can create a queue with the user sign up. As I've mentioned, user sign up is my channel, which is like a queue name, and I've created it. And at last we should have this client application created for this application. So we'll have client id and client secret, which is used in Anypoint code builder before deploying the application to test it out. So this is it about these features and how do we create it. And I just want to give a glimpse about what are the message brokers that are actually available right now with MuleSoft, which supports right now. And that is Anypoint MQ, Kafka, and Solace. Salesforce events. Salesforce data events I think it's an October release, and which is really interesting because you get to create or like a flow on a Salesforce platform, and then you can integrate the Mule user from there, so that you get to use the Async API to update or do the part of it or publish it like a real time scenario. And Avro schemas are introduced uh, like other brokers. Avro is introduced, and also we have Avro schemas to work on. That is it about it. Okay. Use case for this demo that I have taken is that we are going to subscribe the data and publish it to an end system, which is like a single endpoint, a single API that does this. And with the help of async specification, we're going to validate the format of data. And also in the latest release, we have this governance rule sets that are provided by MuleSoft, which is really cool because you get to understand like if there are any mistakes in your design or not. So it will tell you what are the tags or whatever the information that is missing, or if it is correct or not, which makes sure that you're practicing the best practices without any conflict in the long run. So that is it about it. So let's keep the async API for a bit aside, and I want to talk about Anypoint Code Builder for a minute. So if you guys already know about Anypoint Code Builder and how it works, etc., that's really good. If not, this will be a good revision. So this is about the latest October release. But then before that, I just want to show how it works. So yeah, so this is it. So now we are in a trial edition screen. If I go to Anypoint Code Builder here, so you have two options available. One is Cloud IDE, and the other one is like a IDE for desktop. I have already launched the IDE for cloud. You will be able to see the instance that is created. And if you want to install it for desktop, this is the option. So once you launch it, it takes you to the screen, and as soon as you get in, you will be able to see the sorry you'll be able to see the MuleSoft screen. And the extension, like first thing is that you should be installing the Anypoint Code Builder extension pack, which will have all the details, and you'll be good to go. And the other thing is that for Cloud Hub Desktop, if I go and say that install, so it'll give you an information like what to do first. You can install the Visual Studio Code and have the Git and Anypoint platform account ready. So once you install Visual Studio Code, this is how your desktop looks like. So you have all the information. This is an unified environment which will have all design, implementation, develop everything in one place. And if you want to explore more extensions like Postman, Notepad Plus is also available. So you get to trigger the request from here without moving up ahead, or without switching between multiple screens, etc. So that is it about this one. And getting back to sorry so yeah, getting back to this latest release updates. Usually we had transfer message selection for script. I mean, the transfer message did not have this selection between script and resource. So they have provided now, like we have an option to choose between script or resource. Maybe I can show it in the Cloud IDE for you. Okay. So as you can see, it's just a basic flow. And in the transfer message, this is what I was talking about. We have an option to choose between script or resource. If you choose the script, you're going to give the information directly. Or if it is a resource, you're going to add this DWL file, which we usually do in Anypoint Studio, like where we create a package and put all the DWLs inside that. That is one thing. And API auto discovery was not given till now. Now API auto discovery was is added, so you will be able to add it in the global.xml file with the information required, and visual debugger to add the breakpoint. So the next thing is like we have right now remove breakpoint and add breakpoint option, but previously it was not there. We had to go ahead and do it in the XML. So something like this, like okay, yeah, just give it a minute. It is loading. Uh, yeah. So something like this, we had to come here and add the API ID. Or like the breakpoint, etc. So you can deploy your application directly to Cloud Hub 2.0 now. Like we have this option to deploy to Cloud Hub. You can also use the command palette, but then we have this to deploy. And now we have option to publish an API as an example or template. So usually we already have that in Studio, but then in Anypoint Code Builder, publishing an API as an example or template for your entire project is usually done. So that is now supported by Anypoint Code Builder. And as we already discussed, event-driven support is given for Anypoint Code Builder now. Okay, let's get into demo part of it. Demo, as I've already given an introduction about Anypoint Code Builder, I just clicked Design an API. So you can give any project name, and API type, you have to select it as Async API here, and then the YAML, and business group is like whatever the trial account that you have given. So when you create a project, this is how it will look like you will have a screen for you where you can add the entire schema for it. Right now, as we discussed servers, I've added Anypoint MQ and the protocol. Channels, the queue that I've created and added it, and the components where I have specified my payload. So once we deploy this, so to deploy it, we just have Control Shift P, where you will get to implement an API specification. So if you say that if you just click here and say that I want to implement an API specification, it will take you to a project. And to show your assets, you can just we have this any type option. Please select async APIs like without leaving it out, and your organization. So it will show up all the async APIs that you have published to Exchange. You can select any one of it. You just add it as an assert. And once that is done, now we have Mule runtime, which is like latest one, like 4.9.0 and 8.4 are introduced in February, and then we have 17 and 11. So before, like if you go below 4.6.12, you will not have an support for async API implementation. So this is the latest one. So once you create the project, it will scaffold the flow. So let me get back to this. I'm just showing it here because it takes a lot of time for like my screen. It's taking a lot of time for to scaffold and get into the project. So once you scaffold the flow, it will create a Mule project with .xml and global.xml file, and so you'll have a as soon as you import it, you'll have a message listener, and also like you can add the components as you want. In the message listener, you will be able to see that async API config is already given. Like as you have already created that using servers and channels, it will auto populate. And coming to next step, where for example in my YAML that I've specified, this is a subscribe operation or a publish operation for this queue. So when you when you import it, you will already have this API kit for async API. You just have to click on it so that you'll have this publish connector ready for you. You just have to drag and drop. So in this, like you do not have to configure anything. The channel name will be auto populated, and also the server name, because we already mentioned it in the specification, async specification. So once that is done, you're good to go. You can run, debug, and understand like if it is working fine or not. And then you can go ahead and deploy the application to Cloud Hub to test it out. So this is it. Like this is the entire process for it. And I missed to show the governance rules for you. So let me go to this. So as I've mentioned, after completing this, right, we have something called governance rule sets, which is introduced like lately, and you can go ahead and add a rule set here. So what happens is that you can select async best practices. So you'll be able to see that the async best practices is given by MuleSoft. So once you say like add it, it'll add the rule set. I have already added it. So what happens is that it'll be as part of the rule sets, like you can just go ahead and run it. So when you run it, what happens is that it'll scan through all your specification and say what is wrong and is compliant or not to go ahead, or like to go ahead and publish it. So now you can see that it says that subscribe operation should have a description and publish should have the same, and add tags to your API to have a better documentation, and async API demo license URL should be provided. So we can add these details here. So for example, subscribe should have a description. I can add it here, and once I save it, you will be able to see that it is compliant and go ahead and do the next part of it. So that is it. So if you guys have any queries, or like if there are any queries in the chat box, please let me know. Okay, we have open to queries. Like if you do not have any queries, you're good then.
Hello?
Hello, yeah.
Just one. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible. Please tell me.
Hello?
Yeah, you're audible. Am I
Hello,
audible?
hello? Yes, can you hear me? Very good. Well, I have basically regarding, well, something that you mentioned twice in your presentation. It's regarding
Mm-hmm.
our backend.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious. Is there any automatic uh, serialization using our format? Maybe. I understand that this may be a little bit off topic, but it's interesting because well, you underline that our is actually kind of message oriented middleware that this API is supporting.
So your question is that how is Avro being supported, or about the schema?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
So Avro is one of the message brokers that we can include in, like as I have included the Anypoint MQ. But coming to Avro schema, it is completely different. You get to create a schema for specifically for Avro and utilize it in the Async API specification. I haven't implemented it, but then it is available to create a schema and then use it in Async API actually.
Okay, very good. And another question is regarding a policy that you are, well, I
Mhm.
believe, well, I hope you are supposed to be able to apply to this Async API. How does it work regarding usual approach? For example, if you can apply a policy that will specify some restriction on SLA or
Okay.
some
So
yeah.
I have mentioned there is a component called operations, correct? Where we can add traits I have mentioned. So similarly, we can have a security there. So under the security, you can implement your OAuth protocol or whatever the protocol that you want, like basic auth, or like, and there are other authentications, correct? So these authentications can be included in that security under operations and published as a specification, so that it will be already like covered with the policy part of it, like security for the part of security. But then if you are asking about the policies that we apply in API manager, I'm not sure about it, because in API manager we apply policies like this SLA kind of policy will be applying, right? About that, I haven't implemented it. Like I haven't applied any kind of policies for this Async API on Cloud Hub, so I'm not sure. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or queries? Would be happy to answer.
So Anusha, in the slide, I had seen API auto discovery is enabled now in
Mm-hmm.
Anypoint builder. So all set of policies and proxies we can apply now with
Okay.
our API, right?
Yeah, obviously API ID, auto discovery ID is for that, but I'm not sure on the API manager, right? What kind of policies that we can apply or which we cannot do. I'm not sure about it. So yeah, but then you can include your authentications in your security schemas in the specification and do it. Coming to this auto discovery ID, it was already there, but then we had to use this global.xml and go ahead and edit it for that. But right now we have it as a component. It is introduced as a component, which is like easy for us to like. Usually, what you do is like you go to global.xml file, common.xml file, and add the auto discovery and just point it to the main flow, right, in the studio. Something like that is introduced right now. Previously, it was like editing in XML file.
Right, right.
Yeah. And about the policies, yeah, I'll definitely check it out and add it in a blog or something apart from this.
Sure, Anusha, thank you. Team, any other doubts? We can take it up.
Thank you. So these are the references that you guys can go through. This is very detailed and very helpful. And if you want to get involved into MuleSoft, speaking at an event or being part of a MuleSoft mentor program, and will be able to help you.
Uh, yeah, thank you, Anusha. It was a wonderful session.